Bill, could I turn to you first to talk a little bit about, I think one of the things that people would be perhaps concerned about is the legal framework when it comes to investing in Nigeria. We saw that Nigeria's legal system is based on British common law. How well does it function? How smooth do the wheels turn when people have to go through legal processes in Nigeria?
Yeah, thank you so much. I think first and foremost, I would like to say I'm honored to be here. Being a retired customs officer, I associate with what customs is doing. For Nigeria, I left customs to practice business, and I think I have a little bit of experience having worked across the border trade. Major concerns of Nigerian businesses and those coming from outside, looking at the framework, there are about 3 key areas I would like to see them, and that is first, people are concerned that the legal system, as much as is very independent, people do not know how much it protects business. The present constitution we are practicing in Nigeria, the 1999 constitution, recognized the fact that litigation has not been an option in keeping business going, because in foreign businesses, actually disputes must arise. And when disputes arise and you go through litigations, it takes time, it's very costly. Most times, it creates bad blood that kills business eventually. The Constitution recognized this and provided for mediation, arbitration, and other alternatives like conciliation to make it easy for businesses to operate within Nigeria, so that if you have issues, dispute, to resolve it, and you still move on. But beyond that, the Nigeria Investment Promotion Act provided something in 1995 that most people do not know about and are worried about. One, in Nigeria, you can own business 100% being a foreigner, and you can repatriate your capital and profit 100% without restrictions and no inhibitions. The Nigerian government, through that platform also.
Does that work in practice?
Yes, hosts itself from practicing what scares most people in other climes. There's no expropriation of businesses, no nationalization. You are protected if you come into Nigeria that your business will not be nationalized or taken over, and the law is strictly enforced by the Nigerian legal system you talked about that is rooted in the British system. So I would like to dwell on this extensively, but beyond that, other issues the legal framework provided in Nigeria, people are scared of their trademarks, designs, patents. The laws has provided as very serious protection for all these rights. Intellectual property is highly protected as well. Nigeria is a member of the Paris Union, the WIPO, and the customs, as it is, they are protecting these particular rights through the TRIPS agreement, which Nigerian Customs enforces. So you can't come into Nigeria and have issues as people perceive it. Even I'm glad that NAFDAC was here talking about this.
So issues of?
Counterfeiting, dumping, and faking. Somebody raised issue here, which is not very correct, but I didn't want to interject that. What is SON doing? I can tell you today that in Nigeria, every Nigerian sitting here knows that standards have been set for all goods and services in Nigeria. No Nigerian today builds a house with cables and wires made outside Nigeria, because the standard organization has regulated it such that we produce the best wires. No, Nigerians prefer to use tires made in Nigeria today by standard organization regulation, and it's helping every other person to look inwards. And my view here is that our laws protect investment, and the legal system is entrenched in ensuring that those laws are respected.
Tokunbo, you work a lot with, you are the local partner of a great many foreign investors in Nigeria. Is that something that concerns them, functioning in the legal system?
It does, because every investor wants to to know that there's protection for whatever money they bring in. So there are ways to either protect or seek redress if there is a problem. So I mean, we are quite happy that there are adequate laws to protect investments coming in and ensuring the sustainability of whatever it is that you're doing in the country.
And the jurisdiction is Nigeria if there's any dispute, or do people set other jurisdictions?
It would depend on whatever agreement you have with your trading partner. There have been agreements where jurisdiction have been outside, but predominantly, it's largely domiciled in Nigeria.
I'm sorry, while you're talking, could we just address a question that we had earlier on about the issue of security and whether that's something that worries the partners that you speak to?
Security always worries foreign partners for the reason that they all read newspapers and have access to the international media. But having said that, if you have a partnership with a Nigerian firm, you have somebody within to guide you. You do not just walk about, jaywalk about, into traps and problems. What has happened over the last 2-3 years is the government has earmarked a lot of money to tackle the issue of insecurity, especially the problems in the northern sector. And most businessmen have tried to curtail their businesses to those areas that are still immune from a lot of these terrorist-type activities. So if you have a local partner, I guess they're able to guide you as to where and where not to walk into. And generally, security has been tightened. Hitherto, you could move from airport A to airport B carrying anything with you. A lot of international best practice has been introduced in the last 2-3 years that you really cannot get away with all these atrocities anymore. By and large, it's a risk-return situation. In spite of the security issues people talk about, people find that there are overwhelming reasons to try and look for mitigating measures and still carry on with your business because the returns justify usually your being there.
So you can do without a quantity of business in a certain part of the country because what's left to you is still worthwhile.
Well, the issue is that the security concerns have been contained in a very easily demarcated area, and as such, it's not true that every part of Nigeria is on fire. People still walk about and do their businesses normally. We all have issues trying to convince people to come in, but when they come in, they do find that moving around is not as precarious as it is tend to be. It is scary when you read the news, but when you move about on a day-to-day basis in Nigeria, it's not as bad as people paint it to be.
Bengi, could I turn to you? You work with obviously free trade zones. Mm-hmm. How receptive have foreign importers, people buying Nigerian products, been to that? How significant has it been? How much trade do you think you've generated through the zones?
Okay, thank you very much. I may not be able to give you figures that I can ascribe to the free trade zones because a lot of reforms are going on now. But I need to quickly point out 3 major issues that used to be there in the free zone. The first use, which is why I'm quite excited about this, the first has to do with the relationship between the regulatory authority, which is NEPSA, and customs. That was one of the problems I met. The second had to do with infrastructure, and I'm not going to talk too much about it because we've dealt with it. The third has to do with bureaucracy in government, the typical bureaucracy in civil service. But I need to acknowledge publicly that the relationship between, I think it's 2013 was about $7.03 billion. So what that tells us is that despite the challenges, and in addition to the various reforms we're doing, things are beginning to look up. One of the, looking at the various challenges, infrastructure. When I listen to this, what I look for is opportunities. We've spoken about infrastructure. It means there are opportunities in the infrastructure field for people to come in. We've spoken about security. It means there are opportunities in the security field. But within this last bit of 1 year or thereabout, we've been able to attract General Electric into one of the free trade zones with about $1 billion. And the first $250 million is already in. They've started the construction works. And I'm also glad to mention that the first building they are doing in Calabar is a training school. And the trick to that is if you set up a training school, your facility will be ready in about 2 years. You'll be forced to train Nigerians who will now man the various facilities when you come in. And again, I come from a financial background. So the way I look at it is I follow the money. So it's not sit and wait for people to come and meet you. So what I do now is G is here. I'll target other 5 or 6 names within the next 18 months, and I'll follow their suppliers and their distributors. To that extent, there's a company, another Fortune 500 company called Packer. They make 40 component units for GE, and they're already coming to Nigeria. So you bring in GE, you tell their distributors and their suppliers how you will bring their cost of funds down if they come in nearer to their main supplier, and that has been working. So the reforms have been going on. But over and above that, the various reforms, judicial reforms, various things that my Honorable Minister had mentioned are beginning to come together, and people are beginning to see a lot of transparency in the way you do business in Nigeria. I'm also glad that my colleague here mentioned various incentives that investors can use. You have incentives that you can use in the customs territory, and you have incentives you can use in the free trade zone territory. The Nigeria Investment Promotion Act actually came out, I think, in 95. That was actually suited after the NEPSA Act of 91. So I'll be more than willing to discuss about these incentives later on. But the thing is, the minister mentioned it, I'm not sounding arrogant here. If you miss coming to Nigeria now, I think in some few years' time, you will definitely regret it. You can ask the people who have entered the Forbes today just by taking part in MTN. I know 3 people who just participated in MTN, and they're in one of the Forbes book today as one of the richest men in the world. So this is the time to come to Nigeria.
Okay. Prince, how does your association fit in with this?
Yeah, with all that has been said so far, nobody has really looked at the logistics aspect of industrialization. Definitely with industry coming in and taking in raw materials and export of finished products, you need to look at the logistics, the freight forwarding aspect of the movement of cargo in and out. 10 years ago, the business used to be an all-commerce affair until when educated people start looking at that sector as a necessary area where they can participate. And luckily, with the advent of the coming on board of the Customs Administration, led by the incumbent CGC, it became technologically driven. It is not only you're being educated, you should be able to be IT compliant. And that took the sail out of the wind, or took the wind, sorry, out of the sails of those who feel that it's an all-commerce affair.
Right.
So far, what we've been able to do is not been able to catch up as fast as the customs system is being improved upon. And I put the blame largely on the doorstep of Nigerian Customs Service. Because you cannot train everybody, but you can train a part adequately so that it will flow onto those who don't have the capacity of being trained. So what we need in our sector is training and training and training. But be as it may, the Honorable Minister is not here. I would rather he is able to carry our message back. Trade facilitation cannot work hand in hand with revenue generation. Facilitation when the country says, look, Nigerian Customs, like he said, go and get me this money. I don't know where you get it from. Just go and get it. There's no way covering customs revenue.
It saves money, cost of doing business.
But the trade deficit worsened over the past year. Now, I'm not pushing blame here, but the question then is, what happened, and what is being done to ensure that this does not happen again. Thank you.
Dr. Kumba, would you like to take that one?
I think it's best to look at these statistics over a time period. Every now and then, there's a spike in some area of the economy, and you notice movements, some of which may be negative. The incentives being put in place as such as do not have immediate relevance. For instance, I do a lot in the automotive sector. We have just had an auto policy which is trying to encourage local production, starting from local assembly of vehicles. There are a lot of incentives that have been enumerated by government which would discourage importation of some items, at the same time encourage people to go into primary production. Now, it's going to take quite some time before you start to see the effect of these policies, because there is a gestation period while that policy takes effect. The whole idea is to reduce the outflow of foreign exchange, but you must have enough time to grow the local industry. So what I see in the last 2 years data from the World Bank is that at different times, people scramble for foreign exchange because of specific things happening in the economy. But the policies being put in by government are medium to long-term type, and it takes time for them to take effect. What I'd like to see is a 5-year trend which tells you whether or not these long-term policies are having a positive effect or not. And I can assure you that we started producing with Nissan Corporation a couple of months back, as promised, and as earlier mentioned by the minister. Over the next 12 months, we expect to heavily ramp up volumes. When this happens, you find that cost starts to drop, there's less need for importation, and then you start to see the effect of those things. But it will not happen overnight. So there will have been specific things that will have happened at that point in time when things didn't go too well, and it would show in those figures. But by and large, I think we're still the #1 attractor of foreign direct investment. The figures may have dropped, but you cannot remove the Boko Haram effect and all these other little happenings in the environment. But in the long term, and because of the policies in place, there is a tendency for things to be on the upward movement.
Would you like to address that or something?
Yeah, I just need to point out some few things you should know. While I don't want to be prejudiced with the figures you've given, but you also have to look, just like we discussed earlier about informal sector and formal sector. People have started looking for funds in an alternative way now. People use third parties to fund trades, and those third party funding are not captured. Now, if you don't use the FOMM, if you don't buy FX from the autonomous market, if you don't buy it from the banks, the tendency is that those that are funded through alternative sources will not be captured. So that may also be one of the reasons. I think one area we should look at.
Please, Bill.
Yep. Just to add to what my colleagues have said, there is a deliberate intervention of government in the areas of health. We have been doing in education, agriculture, and all that. Those deliberate areas of intervention led to massive importation, even in the schools. And all that accounted to be as though there is this negative trade balance. It was a deliberate policy to intervene in those sectors to bring about the reforms and the result expected. So naturally, there was massive importation against the normal trend. Sure. It was not a drop, because if you went through government policies, you know that the federal government deliberately invested money in several sectors just to bring about the reform and the change. And all that led to outflow of foreign exchange from Nigeria.
Sure. We had a question here at the front. You have a microphone?
Yeah, thank you very much. My name is Mansour Ahmed, and we work for Dangote Industries. My question is addressed to Benga on the
free trade zones. There is currently some debate about whether the current rules and regulations of the free trade zones may not, in certain cases, impede industrialization, especially for the higher level, for instance, in the manufacturing sector of goods and services. And there are people who